What if finding your purpose isn't about waiting for one life-changing moment, but learning how to recognize the meaning in the moments you've already lived? Sometimes purpose reveals itself piece by piece through the family that shaped us, the disappointments that redirected us, the doors we never expected to open, and even the experiences we never would have chosen for ourselves. For Puneet Toor, when you look back and look at the life and lawyer and business owner she is today and trace her story backwards, those pieces begin to come together. Today, Puneet is the founder and principal attorney of Toor Law, a woman-led civil litigation firm where she represents clients in employment law, personal injury, product defects, and business litigation. Her passion for workers' rights grew out of seeing what happens when people don't have power. Her empathy for injury victims connects all the way back to a traumatic car accident, her own family experience when she was a child. And the resilience required to build a firm of her own was modeled long before she became a lawyer by parents who left behind a successful life in India and rebuilt everything from the ground up in Southern California. Puneet's career wasn't the result of following some perfectly mapped out plan. It was built by paying attention to the experiences that moved her, learning from the ones that challenged her, and having the courage and boldness to change direction when she realized her purpose might look a little different than what she originally imagined. Today, we're going to find out how those experiences shaped Puneet and ultimately led her to where she is today. Puneet, thank you for making your way over to San Bernardino, and welcome to Art of Purpose.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Honored to be here.
Yeah, well, we're honored to have you here. And as we get started, just want to encourage all of our listeners. Thank you first and foremost for tuning in to another episode. Really excited about this conversation with Puneet, and we encourage you to share this episode with friends, with family, anyone who you believe is going to be able to hear this, be inspired by it, and this be a value add to their lives. So with that, we're going to get going. Puneet, when you look at, I guess, your life today and the career that you have, is it one of these where like, oh, this makes sense. This is exactly where I expected to be, or how do you feel?
No, no, I don't think that I ever, in my early teen years would have anticipated that this is where I would be. No, I don't think that I had that much in store for myself. I thought go to college, get a good job, make a good living. And I don't think I realized how much purpose would really come into play. So yeah, no, I wouldn't have ever guessed.
Yeah,
but now, like you said, looking back, it makes sense, right? There were signs along the way that I probably should have been paying attention to.
Well, I mean, we rarely do, right? We're sort of like living, even if we have goals, those things change, or sort of you end up living sort of day by day, even with goals ahead, and you don't realize what's the things that are shaping you until you look back at it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Did you ever have a moment where you went, okay, this is my purpose, or really was it gradual? And or is it still something that's being discovered?
I do think it's gradual, and I do think it's ongoing. With every experience comes some shift in your life. But looking back, I think starting my own practice, that was a huge, huge leap. Yeah. And that was something I didn't expect for myself. I didn't think I was that type of person. And I remember thinking, like, I don't think I have the skill sets for this. I don't think that I have the business acumen. I don't think that I have the ability to bring in business. I don't know that I'm the type of person who can manage a business. It just sounded so crazy to me. And then having the thought of, but if I don't do it, then I'll never do it. And, just putting myself in a situation where I was forced to grow in ways that were very uncomfortable, knowing that that was the only way it was going to happen. I was only going to become that person by doing this really hard thing. Yeah. And if I failed, which, I kind of anticipated might happen, what was the worst that could happen, right? I'd have to go back. Maybe I'd move in with my parents. I was lucky enough to have that option. Yeah. And I'd have to go find a job again, which I could do. So I think it was getting over the pride the embarrassment of what that would mean, in being pretty well known in the community, like having, and I had people who were huge supporters and who went out of their way to do everything possible to prop me up to succeed. But I also had people who did not want me to succeed. And that was really shocking.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
There was so much there. I'm so excited to get into this conversation. So good. And we'll take it sort of in stride here. But I'm really excited, and so for our listeners, stay tuned because this is really awesome. Yeah, even just prefacing all of that is just this idea of, it sounds like, right, there was fear, doubt, and all of that mixed in, and you could see all of that. And it was right in front of you, and yet still having that courage and boldness to go, but I'm going to do it anyways.
Yeah.
And I'm going to find out.
Yeah.
Like, that takes so much courage to do. And it's really inspirational, right? Because I think other people who might feel the way that you did as you sort of stood over that ledge, right? Could find that inspiration in you and go, you know what? I feel the same way.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can do it too, even though I don't think I can or have the skills, quote unquote, of what I think is a successful business person or trial or whatever it is. Right. I think that's really cool.
I also think my clients, inspire me in that way because, one of the things I have a hard time communicating to them is, especially in employment cases where we've grown up in this society where your worth as a person can be your career. And you've worked so hard, so many years, going to college, gaining skill sets to get this career or this job. And then for reasons that are not your fault, the world kind of like caves in on you and you go through this really traumatic work environment situation, and people don't appreciate how devastating that could be. It's the entire loss of someone's identity when they go through these workplace issues or a wrongful termination. And this idea that I have to convince them somehow to just hold on because, and I always say, I promise when you look back in 5 years, this is not going to be as painful for you. I promise when you look back at this situation in 5 years, you were going to laugh to yourself because you were going to be in such a better position. And then having to believe myself in that moment when I was making that decision and I was letting go of, kind of being in this position, this career, working at these really great law firms and, the prestige that came with that, the ease of life that came with that, being able to pay all my bills and not worry about money and having to tell myself, okay, it's going to fall apart. Everything's going to go. But in 5 years, you were going to look back and you were going to be happy you made this decision for better or worse, even if you end up back at a law firm, because at least you'd know. And so I think my clients inspire me in that way because they take those leaps all the time.
I love that perspective because you're representing them, you're helping them, you're at the forefront for them, but also their own story and decision to step forward as well is an inspiration at the same time. So this sort of like revolving, sort of never-ending circle of inspiring and being inspired.
Yeah. I hope so. I hope it continues that way.
What drives you today?
What drives me today? To be better than I was yesterday, I think. It's hard to remember how little we knew when we started practicing, right? And how much we've come to learn. I think there are people who are naturally really competitive. And we talked about how I was never that great at sports. But I think that there's also this other component of people who are kind of the mama bears, where they are motivated by their drive to fight for other people. And to protect other people against injustices or unfairness in a world that is wrought with it. And so I think I'm the mama bear personality. I really, connect with my clients, and then I want to fight for them. And when I do that, I want the best skill set possible, right? I want to be better than I was yesterday. I want to have learned emotionally how to deal with certain situations, as well as, know the law like the back of my hand so that I never have to hesitate or second guess. And I'm happy with where I am now. I'm really kind of sometimes blown away with how much I really do know and how much I've learned. But I think it's a never-ending cycle, and the people I admire the most are the lifelong students. So I hope to continue to be that, a lifelong student, and to continue to make myself uncomfortable in ways to grow, stretching the areas that I practice in, and the types of cases that I take on, because I do think that there's a never-ending challenge in the cases we take, right? They get more and more complicated as time goes on.
And as much as you think the two might be similar, each one is different.
Yeah.
I love that you mentioned this idea of like mama bear, right? And I love that because, as mothers have this undefinable quality or way of protecting, right? That even goes beyond the own limitations that one might think existed.
Right. Yeah.
We've heard those stories of, mothers lifting up a car, and it's like, wow, that it's love and care for who they're caring for that brings out even more so in them, right? I think that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think that's where my drive comes from, and seeing myself and so many of those clients, seeing my family, my loved ones, just seeing the patterns of what people go through.
Yeah. When did being a lawyer become more, because it seems more than just a profession for you?
Yeah. When did it become more than a profession? I don't think it ever started as a profession, right? I don't think that I ever thought like, oh, I'm going to be a lawyer and I'll go to an office and I'll work and I'll come home. I think it was always a calling. I just didn't know what it was or where it would take me. So yeah.
I love that. Yeah. From the very beginning. Yeah, it's not clocking in, clocking out. It's something beyond. And I think we see that in your story, and so we're going to get into it right now. And I think maybe that will be a good way for even our listeners to get to know you a little bit more here. We go all the way back, right? Maybe you could talk to us a little bit about your sort of family history. I think that's something that informs. So often I see, and I look at my own life, my parents' lives and their parents' lives, and how that stuff sort of trickles on down, right? And sort of gets passed, and different characteristics, and that I can see in myself that I can trace back to, wow, that's something that was really important, and that sort of has passed on. Can you talk to us a little bit about I think, inspiring and resilience from your grandparents to your parents, and as they came to the United States?
Yeah. So both sets of grandparents had enormous resilience. My mother's side of my family was part of the Great Partition. That's what they call it in India, which is basically when the state of India was, after British colonialism, was divvied up into two separate countries, actually more than two countries, but predominantly Pakistan and India. So the state of Pakistan was created by carving out land from India. And what that meant is that people who were not Muslim had to flee. And so at the stroke of midnight, and this is why Salman Rushdie's Midnight's Children is so famous, at the stroke of midnight, all of these people became refugees in their home country, and they had to flee with their belongings. And it's, I think to this day, considered the greatest land mass migration of humans ever. Over 1 million people died during that transition. And my grandparents were people who were lucky enough to make it to the other side of the border and into India, and they had to start their lives over again. And the political upheaval of all of that, is still in India. It's still there to this day. And my grandparents went through that. They reestablished themselves. Anyone who has grandparents who have probably experienced trauma probably know what that looks like. I had a grandmother who we grew up with, and she didn't like to talk about those times or those things, but enormous resilience. And then, my parents, they created a great life for my parents, and my father's side also very similar struggles, and a lot of resilience kept that family together. And so my dad got a good job, established a good life. My parents got married. they had me and my sister. And then in 1986, there was more political upheaval. And there was a terrorist attack that led to retribution against minority groups, which we are. I'm Punjabi Sikh, so my family's from an area of Punjab. Our religion is Sikhism. And so my dad, I know, lost a cousin during that period. They were just kind of mass slaughtering men between certain ages, like I think 18 and 24. And my parents decided that, hey, maybe there's not really a future here for our kids. And so they immigrated to the United States, to LA, 2 kids in tow, and $500 in their pocket.
Oh my gosh.
And they started a new
All
life.
of $500.
I know. Well, you know,
Gracious.
when I was a teenager, I was making fun of my dad one day, and I was like, Dad, why does everybody have the same story? Like, why, you ask everybody, they're like, yeah, $500 in my pocket, and I had to walk in the snow.
Yeah.
And then one day he said, well, because that was the maximum amount of money you were allowed to leave the country with. And then it dawned on me, that's right. Like, India's having a mass exodus and a brain drain, and they're trying to keep wealth within the country. So it totally makes sense that you would only be able to take like $500.
I didn't know that. Wow. That's
Yeah.
wild.
But so yeah, and they
So
started.
he's like, yeah, it wasn't this concerted effort that we all agreed.
Yeah. But that just, when you're a teenager, you're just like, okay, I've heard this story before, But I don't think I realized just how incredible that is to start a life over again with nothing in a country that you're not familiar with. You don't know the culture, very little resources. And it was hard. It was hard for my dad to get a driver's license here. It was hard for him to get his engineering license. I mentioned to you my mom, who, had been raised very comfortably, all of a sudden was, kind of left out in the lurch doing housework and raising kids on her own with no help. And she took a job at Kmart while my dad looked for work. And, here was a woman with a master's degree in art history in a country where women really weren't that educated. So you knew she was from a good family if she got to go to grad school.
Right.
Just trying to make it work. And I think I learned from them, no job is ever beneath you, right? That was an important skill set to learn, and that's important in our practice.
Yeah, can you talk about that actually? Because I think those stories always, every immigrant story always is something that hits close to home for me. Because it's shared experience, and everybody's is slightly different. Some of the stories that stand out to me a lot as well are the ones where people come from another country. They are professionals. They have a good life there, right?
Yeah.
And then they come over, and it is this idea of are they humiliated at not being able to do that anymore? And how do you get over that?
Yeah.
How do you also go hey, that stuff actually isn't important. What's important is my children, right? And how those lessons then get, passed down to us and children and to their children afterwards. And I think those lessons are so important because now, as well as when we deal with clients, when we deal with people, this idea that there's nobody's better than me, but nobody's lesser than me either.
There's no
right?
hierarchy in life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's and I think that's the best way to be able to interact and treat people, right? It's hey, we can all, we're human beings, we're all the same. It doesn't matter money, whatever position, all of that. And I think it's important for people to go through life that way. I don't want to keep talking, but can you talk?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head, right? There's so many times when we were younger and we used to take taxis, you get into a taxi and it would be like, oh yeah, I used to be a doctor in my home country and, now I drive taxis or own convenience stores. And you see that a lot in the Indian community, people who were just trying to get out and start new lives. But I do think that's a lesson I gleaned from my parents, right? So I would assume, knowing my mother, if you ask her about that time, I don't think she was humiliated. I think she was really proud of herself. I mean, she was challenging herself in all of these new ways and really growing as a person, and supporting her family. I think she should be really proud of herself. And eventually she became a curator at a museum and got to live out what she was educated to do. But I do think that was an important skill set for me to learn, to be proud of that too, right? That my family was able to do all this, because it's the resilience and the strength and the willingness to take chances to help yourself grow as a person. And I do think it informs how I practiced law, and I did everything from even before when I was a law clerk, nothing, no task was beneath me. The mail, sorting through things, documents, whatever. And when you start your own practice, a lot of that stuff you have to do yourself anyway.
100%.
So you don't have help with that kind of stuff. Yeah. And I remember sitting on the floor in my little tiny office watching a YouTube video on how to change out a printer drum when I didn't even know what a printer drum was a month before, right? Like it had never occurred to me. And I had a lot of help, and I didn't do that all by myself. I had an incredibly supportive community that I'm still so grateful for. But I think that resilience I learned from my parents to be able to do that and to take those chances. And I mean, even moving to a new country and starting over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's also, I think, in being willing to do, like you said, no job was beneath you, even starting off, like you end up learning so much more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You'd see, and I hate this phrase, but I'm going to use it anyway. You see how the sausage is made. And I do notice that when people leave big defense firms to move on to the plaintiff side, one of their big concerns is how are the little things done? Like I don't know how to file a CMC statement. I've never done that or whatever. How does filing work? All of these things. And so when you've seen that and you've been willing to do it and you're willing to do it, I think it makes it a lot easier to take that leap.
Yeah, 100%. Did you, in being able to appreciate sort of like your parents' journey, and is that something, that you could see as you were growing up, or is it like, hey, now that as you got older, you were able, those lessons were a little bit more tangible and present in your life?
I think there were a lot of moments that gave me pause growing up that I didn't fully appreciate until I got older. I think growing up in this community in the Inland Empire, I remember my parents saying things like, oh, don't draw too much attention to yourself, or, things like that now I and what those things really mean, right? That they were dealing with different types of racism. And as an adult looking back, I can see it, but I don't think I saw it then. No, I thought my parents were just my parents,
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's, people have similar, different experiences, but, I think it's one of these situations where we draw inspiration from those stories, and particularly as we're living like our lives and think that, this might be the worst situation ever, or like, why is this happening to me? And you go like, well, somebody else went through this and something even worse perhaps, right?
Yeah.
And if she, made it through and successful and is doing what she's doing, like I can't too. There's light at the end of the tunnel.
Right. Yeah. And just being willing to take those risks, I think is so important. But yeah.
Remember you sharing with me about a car accident that your family experienced that ties into the work that you ended up doing as well, right? As an attorney. Can you talk to us about that and that car accident and the impact that it had on your family, and how you were able to then realize how important it is to help people in those moments then as an attorney?
Yeah.
Or sometimes maybe we think of something like a car accident and it's just like an insurance thing.
Yeah.
You make a claim and it's like whatever, right? But it's more than that.
I think so. And I think it was not something I consciously thought about. And it wasn't until I was in those moments helping those people that I realized that there was that some subconscious drive or connection. But yeah, while my parents were struggling to, create a new life, and they had just bought a new car, which was, a big deal, and we really liked it, and we were on a family trip, and we ended up getting rear-ended. And I remember the moment it happened, right? Because I saw my dad driving, and I saw him. He was like, he kept looking up in the rear view mirror, and he had this like look of tension in his face that I could see in the mirror. And then like I saw him brace himself, and it was me, my sister, and my brother in the back. My little brother, really young, in the middle. And then I saw my mom, and she did the thing you should never do in car accidents, which is she turned around to grab us, right, as the impact was happening. And it was pretty devastating as a child. It was traumatic. And I just remember, it being a really big deal, and all of these police cars, all the glass had shattered all over us, and there was blood, and we weren't seriously injured, but as a child, you don't know that. It's just like so traumatizing. And all my clothes, and I didn't care as much about the clothes, but I had a little craft kit that had like glitter, and it was a pink plastic suitcase, like a caboodles thing.
It was the most valuable possession.
It was my most valuable possession. And I just saw it like on the freeway, and cars running over stuff and our clothes, and my mom having to wear a like neck brace for a couple months after that, probably because of that move she decided to pull. And we were hit by drunk drivers. They ended up fleeing the scene. Nobody ever found them. And what my dad called, I think my dad called a local attorney. I just recently asked him about this because it was all just coming back to me. And I think they said, well, there's nothing we can do, right? Probably my parents didn't have UIM insurance. They probably didn't know about that. They were learning other things in life, but
they hadn't scrolled that TikTok yet.
yeah, they hadn't watched any of our videos. And so, yeah, I think there was just nothing. You just started over again, right? And we had to replace that car, and it just was a really traumatic experience, and the helplessness of it, right? To be a victim, to have someone like be so careless with your lives and the lives of your loved ones, and to have no ability to hold them accountable. That feeling is really awful. And, I'm sure it's how many victims feel, victims of crimes, that helplessness. And so I don't think it was ever conscious, but at some point after I started doing personal injury work, which I never thought I would do, right? I never thought that would be something that I would be doing. I look back and I'm like, oh yeah, I do remember all of that. And that's helped me empathize with these clients this entire time. So yeah, that was definitely a factor, I think.
Yeah. And speaking of, you not ever envisioning that you'd do personal injury work, when did you decide that you wanted to be an attorney, and did you have an idea of what you wanted to be?
Yeah. Yeah, so I think I fought against the idea. I grew up, everybody said, oh, you argue, you'd be a great attorney.
Okay, so
I was always told that. And I thought I wanted to make impact on a greater, what I thought would be a greater level. I didn't understand these things, but I thought, oh, I'll get into politics. That'll be great. And I studied poli-sci in college, and hated everything about it. And then you learn how politics really happens, right? And it's not what I anticipated, and I was really disappointed by it. And so then I thought, okay, well, I can work for like an NGO or a nonprofit and do that kind of work. And that really led me to getting involved in like immigration and refugee type literature and projects and scholarship. And so that's what I ended up doing my senior thesis on in undergrad, was on the asylum regime and what we as a society deemed consequential enough to merit asylum or refugee status, right? And so I found that really fascinating.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
I want to read that.
Yeah. I mean, now it's all, it's all gone up in the air, this last administration, but, or a few administrations now, but, it was really fascinating at the time. And I thought, okay, that's what I want to do. I want to be like a professor that teaches about these things, not understanding how any of this worked. But yeah, as I was saying, I was really fascinated by that, and I didn't really understand how that system worked. So I thought, you just get to kind of become a professor in academia and do this work. I didn't realize that it's not like really a job. It's like something you do on the side. Yeah. But I set my sights on doing immigration work, because that was the closest thing to getting to do like country conditions reports for asylum and refugee cases. And I ended up working at a nonprofit my first summer doing that kind of work. And I realized really quickly that my job was not what I expected it to be. It was compiling these country conditions reports and then calling kind of these bigger firms and seeing who could take them pro bono for me. So it was like I was just doing paperwork, basically. I wasn't getting to do any of the fun stuff. And that there weren't really attorneys who do that, like you have to have such a well-funded nonprofit to even be able to justify that. And it doesn't make sense when you have free attorneys willing to do it for their pro bono credits at their big law firms. So that quickly went out the window.
So you were in law school at this time.
I was in law school already.
And so for people and maybe listeners who may not know, there are firms, sometimes they require their attorneys to do pro bono type of work, and it's a good reflection on the firm. It could be requirements, whatever. And those are the type of hours that were the attorneys and their hours that were being devoted to that. So the nonprofit smartly would be assigning that type of work to those people who are doing work for free, right?
Who are doing
so
it for
you,
free.
I get it, and because we all had like a clerkship somewhere where you're like, I remember doing the summer, and it was like a clerkship, and I was going, is this what an attorney is? Like, I don't think I want to be an attorney.
Yeah, you're just pushing the papers.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and sometimes it's like a treat for them, right? If you work at a big law firm and you're kind of doing work that isn't morally fulfilling, they kind of throw you a bone sometimes, and they're like, here, work on this asylum case. And it brings balance to your life. And I'm so grateful that those attorneys do that and those firms do that. But,
in your position, it wasn't that great because you actually weren't given the opportunity to work in a meaningful manner.
Yeah. And I didn't have any interest in doing any of the work that they did at those big law firms either. And so I pretty quickly learned like, oh, this is not going to work out. And it was depressing and it was hard work. But at that nonprofit, I was exposed to a lot of different areas because I couldn't just do the immigration work in a vacuum. I also needed to do a DV clinic. We did a healthcare clinic, and we did a workers' rights clinic. And so we had, all of these services for the community, and I was given a summer stipend to work there. So I was, helping with all these programs. And I went to my roommate's happy hour one day. She worked at a tech company, and one of the gentlemen at the happy hour had brought a friend of his who was a lawyer. And so he said, oh, you're a lawyer. Let me introduce you to my buddy who's also a lawyer, which is what we do, right? And the friend said, oh, he introduced himself. And I introduced myself, and he said, oh, your name sounds so familiar. Like, what are you doing right now? And I told him, I'm working this summer at this nonprofit. And he said, oh, well, my law firm actually put towards your stipend for you to work at that nonprofit. How do you like it? And me having no sense of decorum, I was like, oh, actually, I hate it. It's terrible. And he laughed. And he said, okay, well, tell me what you don't like about it and tell me what you do like about it. And I said, well, I can't do anything.
I will say, by the way, to your credit, because that clearly was delivered in such a good way, because it could be delivered in a really bad way and then completely turn people off. But you clearly were honest and delivered it in a way that was like, okay, well, let's talk about it. Right?
Yeah, I think I was just being honest. Yeah.
Yeah, there's different ways to deliver that. And you did it the right way, sounds like.
And I don't think anybody realized how hard it was, because a lot of times when I was doing the immigration clinic, I would have people bus in the mornings, and they would wait in a line outside my office. And so all day they would wait, and I would come in and see them one at a time. And for most people, there was nothing I could do for them, right? They were undocumented. It was past their year mark. And so my advice was, here's a handout. Don't answer the door if ICE knocks. And to live, and now it's such a different environment than it was back then. But even back then, I remember thinking what kind of life is this to live in fear like that all the time? And it was so disheartening to me. It was so depressing that I couldn't do it. I couldn't spend my entire day just sitting there telling people I couldn't help them, who waited hours just to see the law clerk who doesn't know anything, So it was a really tough time. I think I was a little bit depressed. Also, I had worked my way up to this, right? This was supposed to be my career and my life. And
a lot of questions right now, right? A lot of doubt. All of a sudden you're like, wait, what?
What is this? And this is how life works? This is just crazy. It's crazy that nobody has thought of a better way to do this. And so he said, well, is there anything about what you're doing now that you like? And I told him I like the workers' rights clinic. I like the workers' rights clinic because it is so easy to get them justice, right? They are brought in by someone to work in back rooms or kitchens or warehouses, and they're promised $2 an hour to do the work. And then they come to our nonprofit because they want us to reach out to their employer and tell their employer to pay them the $2 an hour that they're owed. And I get to turn around and say, actually, you're entitled to, more than that. You're entitled to minimum wage. And the employer has to prove that you didn't work the hours that you say you did. So the labor court will take you at your word, and they have to disprove it because it's their job to document your time, not yours. Wow. And so you get to go to labor court, and you just get judgments. I think I told you this. One of the most shocking things about doing that work was having to convince people that they should take a minimum wage payment, because they were people of honor and integrity, and they said that they would work for $2 an hour, and they didn't want to go back on their own word, even though the employer was not paying them that $2 an hour. So I explained to the gentleman at the bar, the lawyer, that I really like doing that work. And he said, well, why don't you come intern at my firm? And at that point, I had no idea who he was or what law firm it was. Turned out to be one of the most prestigious plaintiff side law firms. And the work that they did was incredible. And I just got to experience so many things. So I got to advocate for people in need. I got to do it well. And I got to win for them. And, what greater joy is there than that? Yeah. Feeling worthwhile, feeling like you're useful, and being able to accomplish something for people who really need it. Yeah. It was like a no-brainer after that. I was hooked.
Yeah, and absolutely. Yeah. And we're, the former felt like a conduit to just sharing bad news and no hope, to then being able to have meaningful. And when you said, it was easy to get them justice, I know what you mean, meaning that there is justice that can be had for them, right? Yeah. Accessed for them and provided for them, as opposed to there's nothing to do. Yeah. And I'm sorry.
There's nothing I can do. Yeah.
That's wonderful. And so all of a sudden this idea of wanting to help people in a meaningful manner coalesced in a chance happy hour meeting.
Yeah, right? I know. And that just goes to show, the power of this community and these networks and something I went to a networking event once, and a woman, I was kind of wallflowering it, and I said, I don't really know anybody here. I don't really want to talk to anybody. And if you could believe, back then in law school, I was shy. And she said, if you approach people with authenticity and tell them what you need help with, people are invested in helping you. And I thought that was so interesting. And so I took her up on it, and I approached people and I said, hey, I don't really know anybody here. I'm a little nervous about chatting. I'm Puneet. I'm a law student. I don't know what I'm doing, and so many people were just so helpful and wonderful. And I think it's that authenticity that really drove me. And people love being a part of your story, right? They love picking other people up and helping them find their way. I love doing that for people. It makes me feel worthwhile and valuable. So I think that approach really helped me, and with this gentleman as well, who was really candid about what I needed and what I needed help with. And so I started doing all sorts of cases there. We did disability discrimination. I did police misconduct case, employment cases, a lot of civil rights cases. And my first job out of law school, my first job offer, I got to do a lot of different types of work. I got to do mass tort work. I got to do class action. And then eventually I wanted to do those individual employment cases again, the whistleblower retaliation, disability discrimination, workers' rights. Those cases I was still drawn to. But at that particular firm, they said, okay, we don't do employment and individual cases by themselves. If you're going to do individual cases, meaning you represent one plaintiff, you have to do personal injury and employment. And I thought, okay, never thought I'd be a personal injury attorney, but I could do that.
Sure.
And I never expected to resonate so much with doing personal injury work, to the extent that when I moved to my next law firm, there was not an opportunity for me to do employment there. And I still took it because I knew the personal injury cases were going to be really meaningful and it was going to be a great experience and I was going to learn a lot. And so there was a period of maybe 3 or 4 years where I didn't practice any employment law. And I was just doing personal injury work and represented a lot of children, a lot of catastrophic injury cases, and just learned so much from my partners there who were really amazing.
That's wonderful. And I did want to mention, by the way, before we move on, the amazing advice that you gave about approaching people.
Oh, really?
And just going like, hey, like, I don't know anybody here. And I, as you were saying that, I was thinking about being in that position. If somebody were to approach me, absolutely, I'd talk to them, right? And you'd feel almost like invested immediately and like, hey, like, what's your name? Where are you from? Okay, cool. Well, you know, this is this person. And that's literally how I would react to that.
Yeah.
And it's such a great way. And, you know, for all our listeners, you know, the students, young people who, when you're in a happy hour networking event or anything like that, or you see somebody that you want to talk to, I think that's such a great way. I've never thought about doing that in that way. That's such great advice. Yeah.
Yeah. And now I do it, right? So if I see someone who doesn't know anybody, you better believe they're coming with me to meet every single person in the room. Drives my husband up the wall that I do this, but people did it for me, right?
Yeah,
And I think it's such an easy gift that you can give somebody to just make them feel comfortable and at home. So easy.
Yeah. In particular, I think in the plaintiff community, I think it can apply to people universally, but in the plaintiff community, I mean, what we do is we help people, right? So I think that naturally fits.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. There was two additional things that I wanted to ask you about how and the impact that it had on you. One was, I know when you were trying to go to law school, there was a change from where you thought you originally wanted to go.
Yeah.
Right. And then also the bar exam as well. And I wanted to follow up on that and both of those because I think those are learning opportunities and how that changes our plan for ourselves, but for the better as well.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about those two?
Sure.
By the way, I didn't pass the bar the first time either.
Yeah.
Right? So, and I think I think it's a part of my story, and I think it helps folks as well and encourages people along the way.
Yeah. And I like to remind people, like, it's never a reflection of intelligence, right? It has nothing to do with that. And being able to be comfortable talking about it and using it as an opportunity to help people get through that period, because that period is tough. So I guess I'll start with the bar exam. I've never been a great test taker, especially anything having to do with like logic games, mathematics. I tend to overthink it. I don't think I realized at that point that I did have ADHD. I had no idea, right? And I think I just emotionally got overwhelmed by the process of studying for the bar, that when I went into one of the logic games, one of the performance exams, I just could not get it. It was and I will never forget the question, right? It was like, what if Sarbanes-Oxley applied to nonprofits or something like that? And you had to create a matrix and you had to like do all these categories, and I just could not get the matrix. I set it up, then I second guessed myself. I erased it. I did it again. I second guessed myself again. And by that time I was out of time. And that was what cost me the bar exam that first time. But I was completely and utterly devastated. And I think, I think I went through a real bout of depression. And I had to study for it again. And obviously I was embarrassed because everyone else passed, or so I thought. You don't really know until afterwards how many other people did it. But I made a decision, and my decision was, okay, I didn't pass, but I will continue to take this test as many times as I need to pass. And whatever that light switch was that flicked on or flicked off, that took the pressure off for me, because it was not like, okay, I have to pass this time. No, I'm going to take it 10 or 15 times if I have to. And as soon as that mentality switched, I think my approach switched, and I was able to pass the second time. But I always tell people, not to put too much credence into not passing the bar exam the first time. so many people who are really successful attorneys don't pass the first time. And I actually think, some of the most successful attorneys you and I know were not academically the best students. And
Not academically inclined.
not academically inclined, because to be successful requires thinking outside of the box. And if you're, your entire life a good student, in some ways you've successfully navigated thinking inside the box and answering the questions the way that you're expected to. So I never think that those types of things correlate with success, because in our own personal experience, we see that that's not true. And sometimes it's the students who are most academically gifted in school that have the hardest time adjusting to the workplace. So that was my bar exam experience.
Yeah, by the way, I love that, and thank you for that. I love this idea of, you made a decision, I'm going to take it as many times as I need to pass it. Because I think in doing that, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but it seems to me that in doing that, this mentality shift also was like, you took away the pressure of like any outside thought.
Yeah.
What are people going to think about me?
Exactly.
Right? Because it actually doesn't matter. I can take this 10 times. It's until I pass it, I'm going to keep doing this, right? So I don't care what anybody says. That doesn't matter to me. And I think that's a big burden, weight to take off of our shoulders, right? Because so many times we're thinking about like, oh, what's this person? What are they going to say? What are they going to think? My reputation? No. I have a goal and I'm going toward the goal, and it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Right? The rest is irrelevant. And that is something that helps mentally as well, be able to pick yourself up after something like that, right? And just go.
Yeah. And to realize like nobody really cares that much about you, right? Everyone's invested in their own story, and they're so concerned about how they come off that they're not that worried about what goes on in your life.
Yeah.
Especially 5 years, 10 years down the road.
Nobody's asked. Nobody's ever asked.
No, nobody is mildly concerned. And then the other thing you asked me about was when I decided that I wanted to go to law school to be, a nonprofit attorney, which nobody told me wasn't a thing. It's very hard to do. I was inspired by this professor at UC Hastings. Her name was Karen Musalo. And she was kind of the person who wrote all this scholarship about asylee and refugee law that I found really fascinating. And I thought, okay, if I could just get to UC Hastings, I will, be able to study under her, and I can learn from there and figure out how to make a career out of this. And I did not get into UC Hastings, and I was totally devastated. And, now I kind of laugh, because I realize most people don't get into the law school that they thought that they were going to go to. But I thought for sure, I'll get into UCLA or one of these other schools. And I didn't get in. And I did end up getting into Loyola, and Loyola was close to my family, which is what I wanted. It was in Southern California. I remember I was looking at USD and Loyola, and I felt instantly at home at Loyola because it was such a diverse school. And I remember thinking it's a Jesuit school, but this is a place that reflects my values. And I did not feel that way at USD. And it was really noticeable between the two campuses. And I think, to what you were saying earlier, to your point, that was absolutely the best place for me to be. And I had the best law school experience. I don't think anybody could have had a better one.
That's awesome. I love it. Yeah. So I had the second best law school experience.
Yeah.
I love Loyola too. Please keep going. Yeah.
But and I became really invested. I created a great community. I had great friends. I planned all the bar reviews. I threw all the parties. I was the president of the DSBA, and I just don't think I would have thrived anywhere else in the same way. And so I'm really grateful that
you spoke to my class.
Yeah. You were saying
for
that.
those who don't know, Puneet gave the orientation speech to all the 1Ls first years when I was coming into law school. So that's how years later, obviously we didn't interact during law school, but years later, I remember seeing you. I was like, hey, she spoke. She's the one that spoke to us.
Yeah. And now, my paralegal is interested in going to law school, and I want her to go to Loyola because I know it reflects her values too. And what's interesting is she sent me her personal statement, and I know a lot about her, right? Because we've worked together now for 3 years, and she's remarkable. I adore her. And I remember thinking like, oh, she doesn't realize how her story has played into what drives her. And so I made little suggestions here and there, like, oh, why don't you mention that thing? And, you know, and I think it's so interesting that we are driven in these ways that you can't really see 100% until you look back. And so I think that was my experience as well. Now looking back, I'm like, oh gosh, of course that all makes sense. But while you're navigating those things, you don't really know what's driving you.
Yeah. And it's funny because like people talk about failures and successes. Like I know something can be defined as a failure, but it's also how you choose to look at it, because is it really a failure? Or it's a learning lesson, opportunity, because I keep moving forward, right? Like we keep going. So how did like those experiences change the way you viewed quote unquote failure, or the way that you approached difficult situations in life?
Yeah. I think it changed everything. I think not passing that bar exam and then passing it the second time, I was, I think in a lot of ways, especially in high school and even in undergrad to some extent, I think I was guilty of like sleepwalking through life. Like people were telling me what to do and what I was supposed to do. And I wasn't really that passionate about it. And it wasn't until the end of college where I really started to let things that I cared about drive me. And maybe that's why I was sleepwalking, because I think I was doing what I was told to do. And there wasn't really any passion behind it. And so as soon as I started to think about like, what do I actually want to do with my life? Like, who do I actually want to be? It changed my level of like interest in my own life. And so when I got to the point where I didn't pass the bar exam and I had done everything I was supposed to do, I did the Barbary courses and everything, and I didn't pass. And then I made that decision that I was going to do it as many times as I needed to. And I believed it, right? It wasn't me just saying it. I knew that was true and I was going to do it. And I was in a position where I could do it. I'd have to move it back in with my parents, but I could do it. And that moment of resilience stayed with me because it changed the way I saw myself. I was no longer somebody who was sleepwalking and doing what I was told. I was resilient and I was a fighter. And I saw myself in a different light that I carried with me from then on out, that I could overcome this incredible burden while dealing with depression, right? While dealing with a lack of confidence and all these things. And I think it gave me the confidence I needed in my next chapter in my career as an attorney. Because you'll remember your first year as an attorney, you're also like, what the hell is going on? You don't know anything. And people are just, they literally throw you into the water and you have to learn how to swim. Yeah. And I think if I hadn't had that experience, I wouldn't have been as prepared for that first year as I was.
Mentally.
Yeah, mentally.
And
just
that makes
confidence.
All the difference.
Yeah.
All the difference.
Yeah. I think the bar, practicing law, half of it is a confidence game.
Yeah.
So
100%. I love that. Thank you. And that's awesome, because I think what it shows us too is as much as, yes, it's important to get good grades, study, do everything. And we're not saying don't do any of that, right? That's important. You have to learn, lifelong learner, all that stuff. You also have to work on your mental as well, right? That is important. Not to beat yourself up over things that may not work out. Learn from it and keep going. And I think that's what I see so much when I love in your story as well, is that let's say you were at that internship that maybe was not the most intellectually stimulating or even the most gratifying, like emotionally, right? But you kept showing up.
Yeah.
And you kept being present. And then when the opportunity popped up at that happy hour, you were able to take advantage of it. And I think that's so important for people to keep showing up, right?
Yeah.
Keep moving forward. And life can also reveal then what's next.
Yeah.
Right. Find providence, reveal sort of where we go next. And I see that sort of in your story here, where it's awesome. There's a resilience, there's this mental fortitude, sometimes forged by these difficult experiences. And how else, I have this thing here, this is one of my favorite one, smooth seas never made a skilled sailor. Yeah. And it's because like those experiences are the ones that make us better.
Yeah. And I do think that, my journey, like becoming a personal injury attorney and an employment lawyer, things that a plaintiff's attorney in general, things I never anticipated, reflect that I think that the universe, divine intervention, whatever you want to believe in or call it, it guides you. And in those moments where you're like trying to figure out what's next, there's always something, you know, a chance meeting at a happy hour or something that gives you like the guidance that you need to take you to a place where you're going to be happy. And I do think, you know, I love the name of your podcast, The Art of Purpose, because I think a lot of, especially young people who were sleepwalking, like I felt like I was in college, are just thinking like, okay, how am I going to pay my bills? And it's hard now because a lot of us are not living as well as our parents' generation lived. And so there's really this like economic kind of struggle going on where it's like, okay, well, how am I going to make a life for myself with AI technology, taking jobs and all of these things? But I think that what you don't realize at that age is how much purpose comes into play, because you're earning money so that you live a comfortable life so that you're happy. But if you're not happy, then what was the point? And so the importance of purpose becomes so much more evident the older you get, and making those choices that, you know, anybody who becomes a plaintiff's attorney just for the money is crazy, if you ask me. Like there are better ways to make money, I think. And you know,
there's gotta be.
Yeah, there's gotta be. But you really have to love it, and you really have to love what you do.
Yeah.
And sure, there are people who make a business out of it. But if you ask me, I don't think a lot of them are fulfilled, and I don't think they do a lot of, you know, when they're solely profit driven, you're not doing justice for your clients. But people who are able to help clients and make a great living for themselves, what a gift is that? You know, like I cannot think of a better profession in the world. I really can't. So.
And speaking of that, you know, you opened up your own practice. I know, having done that, it's a big decision, right? Can you sort of talk to us? Maybe it's something people want to do. Maybe it's something they've never even thought of or that they were capable of doing, right? How did you arrive at that decision? What, you know, led you to take that leap? And what has the experience been like so far for you?
Yeah, so I still it's been, I don't know how many years it's been, 8 or 9 years. It still feels like early days though. Like I still feel like I just stepped into this. So maybe ask me in 10 years.
By the way, Sharon told me a stat when we reached 5 years that I forgot what the stat was, but it's like that. Yeah, what's the percentage? Yeah, it's like more than like, that they don't even reach 5 years.
Yeah.
Right. Most businesses, and you're at 8.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I think it's.
And growing.
And growing. Yeah. There were a lot of decisions that went into it. I think it was something I wanted to do. I think if you're a person who even has like an inkling of wanting to do it, 100% do it. It's not for everybody though. So, you know, again, you don't do it to make money. You don't do it for a lot of other reasons. You have to do it because you really want to. But for me, I was at a crossroads and I had to make a decision about whether I wanted to be an associate at a law firm or run my own business. And there were a lot of reasons why I decided to start my own practice. One was, you know, I had now worked at 3 different law firms, and some were really great experiences, but maybe, you know, there were certain aspects that I wanted more experience in. Some were really horrible experiences, and I didn't want to subject myself to that. And I do think that, you know, as a woman in the plaintiff's bar, it is really difficult to navigate a lot of those employment situations, especially as a young woman. And so I think a lot of that experience played into my decision to want to create something that was my own, where I get to interact with clients the way that I want. I get to take the cases that I want. I get to hire the staff that I want. And I love the people that I work with every day. Every day I am so grateful for them. And I hire people who really care about our clients too. And so I've been able to like build something like almost like a little community of my own. And I can't imagine anything being better than that.
You're setting the culture.
I'm setting the culture, yeah. And I think it's a culture that was lacking.
Yeah. Was, you know, and when you think about your firm and sort of what you're creating, what does that look like into the future, right? What is it that you want your firm to continue focusing on? What do you want the firm to stand for?
Yeah, I I was lucky enough in one of my firm experiences to work at a place I really loved with people I really loved, and they were like a family. And I remember it being so unique because, you know, if something went wrong, there were 5 people ready to like, you know, jump on the sword for it, right? And just how much they cared about each other, how much they cared about the work and their clients. And I thought, oh, this is what I want to emulate. This is what is good. And so for my vision of my practice, I wanted it to be like a family, like people, you guys have a literal family, but people who genuinely care about each other and who work together for many, many years and who are invested in each other's lives. And at that firm where I had a really good experience, one of my partners once said to me, he said, "You're a lawyer. Your job is to take care of these people. You have to work on the cases. You have to generate enough income so that they can take care of themselves and their families. That's your responsibility." And I took that really seriously. And now I'm trying to do that with my staff. And I feel like we're still early days, but I guess it has been quite a number of years.
I love that. And again, it says more about you as well, that you are thinking. There's, you mentioned Mama Bear, right?
Yeah.
But it's not just clients, it's your employees as well as the people that are under your wing and for whom you're responsible.
Yeah.
Right? And you care about them. They're not just, people who are clocking in. You're not using them to do something that you want with your business. No, it's a family that you're creating, and you care about them beyond just the numbers.
Right. Yeah. I think going to work somewhere you enjoy working every day is more important than the bottom line. And I think there are a lot of attorneys that would disagree with that, but the work culture is so important.
Yeah. And you end up making money anyways, like you said, right? You do the right things, you care about the right things. And at the same time, of course, you also have to learn the business side as well, because it is a business. Is there something that you learned pretty quickly over the years that you're like, wow, they don't teach us this in law school, right?
Oh, so many things. So many things. There's so little you learn in law school when it comes to practice. Quick decisions. Quick decisions were really important to learn. Hire slow, fire fast. If somebody is not, the right ethos for your practice, if they don't have the right values, people are motivated more by their identity than they are by like the fear of being chastised, right? So for me being upset with you over you missing a deadline or something should pale in comparison to letting down our clients. And if you're the type of person who is more concerned about our clients than you are about my feelings about you, then you're the type of person I want at my practice. So I think those were all business lessons. There's so many, really. Moving quick. The faster you move, the better for everything, for your clients. So many. And one of the best lessons I've learned, which has improved my quality of life and my business, is if I don't genuinely like a client, I don't represent them, because it never ends well.
100%.
The client can sense it, you feel it, and then someday down the line, the jury is not going to like them either. And now you've dragged them out for so many years.
It's not a good experience for anybody.
Yeah, it's not a good situation for anybody.
Yeah.
So that's been important to learn.
I think that's so smart, and it goes along with what people talk about, like, hey, the case that you don't take is just as important as the cases that you do take.
Yeah.
Because those, the former tend to take up a lot of your time, and it doesn't lead to a very fun life if that is part of your ongoing or daily.
And when you start your practice, there's that temptation. And every single person I spoke to told me this: do not take every case, because you're like worried about how you're going to, create a practice. Like, don't do it. And of course I did it, right? Like everybody does it, because you're nervous and you're used to having a full caseload, and all of a sudden you have nothing on your plate and you're like, what am I doing with my time? Right? Something's better than nothing. That's what you start to think. And that's where, having really belief in the universe, because if you do all the mathematics of like a business plan and projections and how much business you have to bring in and, a marketing budget and all these things, it doesn't make sense. None of it, like from a business point of view, it doesn't make sense. So there's this other component, which is just faith that you just have to have, that the universe will provide. And somebody said that to me. They said, you just take the steps and it just happens. I can't describe to you how it happens, but it does. And that was my experience. That's what happened.
Yeah, I love that. You mentioned earlier the idea of like, hey, I'm just going to do it and I'm going to find out, right? And I love that because I've literally said that as well. This idea of like, look, I want to open up my practice. You move forward in faith, like you said. I believe it, but at some point, I don't know, really, right?
Yeah.
And so you just gotta go for broke and like, hey, I'm gonna find out, right? But you need that level of risk. It is a risk and boldness, and you've done that, and you've stepped out and did that. I know that Toor Law, being a woman-led firm, is something that's important to you.
Yeah.
You touched on it briefly a little bit earlier, but why is that so important to you?
I think civil litigation is a tough place for women. And, I heard early on in my career, the guys kind of joke about female litigator syndrome, which is like this idea that you have kind of a chip on your shoulder because you have to make up for the fact that you feel inferior as a woman, right? That's how I read it. And it took me a long time to navigate the gender politics of a lot of those early years in practice, dealing with opposing counsel, dealing with judges. I think sexism, even if it's not conscious, it's a subconscious bias, is something that female attorneys are still really, really dealing with in a way that significantly impacts the quality of their life and their practice. Myself, I'm no different. I think it gets easier to navigate the older you get because you learn, exactly what your style is and how you choose to deal with situations like that. But I think that having a place where, and I do hire male employees as well, but the ones that I do hire also have this awareness of gender dynamics and things that go on in the practice of law. And I mean, I could tell you stories. We all have stories that are just inconceivable, like the things that opposing counsel has said, or the situations that a lot of young lawyers find themselves in. And so being a female-led law firm is really important to me because, frankly, you don't see that many. You don't see a lot of women who continue to thrive in the plaintiff side practice. There's a lot of reasons for it, but at least one of them is that it just historically there has not been space laid out for them. And so I think for me, and I follow in the footsteps of my mentors. So I remember going to CALA meetings really early on, and a lot of those women went out on their own and they were solo practitioners because there was no room to be a mom and a lawyer. They could not have their children at the office. They weren't allowed. They could not work from home. They could not take time off. And even my first job, I remember when the male associate would go home early to make sure he tucked his kids in to bed, it was like, wow, he's awesome. What a great dad. And when the female associate did it, it's like, oh, she left early, right? Like there was this significant bias between the two. And so, I look at people like Jeannie Harrison, who's always been a role model of mine, and she has a woman-led law firm, and she's created this powerhouse of attorneys who advocate for other women. And, I look up to her and I want to follow in those footsteps.
Yeah, that's awesome. And, adding Toor Law to a group of women-led firms, I think is so important because it gives a concrete example of it happening in real time.
And when I was starting practice, there weren't that many examples. So that's why when I met Jeannie, I instantly, was so impressed because she was competing with all of the male lawyers, and she had built a practice, and she's beautiful and graceful and all these other wonderful things too. And I thought, oh, I'd love to emulate that.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
As we start landing the plane here in this wonderful conversation, I've enjoyed it so much.
me
Thank
too.
you. What would you tell somebody who doesn't yet know what their purpose is and is trying to figure that out? What would be your advice to them? Incomplete hypothetical. I get it. Objectively.
No, I think it's a moving target. I think our purpose changes as our life changes, but that it will find you if you're open to it, right? If you're open to moving towards the things that touch your soul, if you're willing to move in that direction, your purpose will find you. I think the only people who don't find their purpose are people who choose to live in incongruence with their own values. Like they're showing up at work every day, even though they're not happy, but they are too fearful to make a change. And so maybe you don't have to make a big change. Maybe you just make a small change where you focus on a hobby before you go to work or after you get home or something, follow a passion, anything. And just sitting down and journaling sometimes I think helps me process thoughts. And I think it can be enormously helpful, but I think it finds you.
Yeah. And what would you tell, if, looking back at life, you go back and speak to younger Puneet and say, hey, speak to the one who thought that she had everything planned out.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
And, who then experienced perhaps some disappointments, some failures, some highs and lows in life, all of that comes with it. And had no idea that she would eventually step out and build her own firm and create a place where she loves to come in every single day and people that are able to build their lives because of the firm that she created. Yeah. What would you tell her?
I would tell her that it's going to be a bumpy road, but that every bump is going to be well worth it. And that, it's all a gift. And I believe that. I really do. So
it's beautiful. Life is a gift.
Yeah. The bumpy road is a gift, right?
Yeah.
Because it helps you appreciate everything and
100%.
makes you stronger, gives you faith in yourself, all of that. Wow, I feel like I'm getting so abstract here. But yeah, that's what I would tell myself.
Yeah. It's abstract, but it's very tangible as well, right? Because it's how we can learn to explain and process sometimes challenges in our lives, right?
Yeah.
And, sometimes if we admire too much in the hurt is where we can get stuck, right?
Yeah.
But even those things can turn out, as we have seen, in such a wonderful, wonderful way.
Yeah.
So,
well, here's hoping.
Yeah, here's hoping. Puneet, thank you so much once again for making your way over to us. And I really very much enjoyed our conversation. Thank you for being with us. And we look forward to seeing everything that Toor Law continues to accomplish.
Ditto with your practice. All right. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And once again, thank you to all our listeners. Thank you for joining us on yet another episode. Just a wonderful conversation today. If this was something that was a value add to your life, I'm going to ask you and encourage you to share that with 1, 2, 3 people. Just send it to them. Send them the link. They're going to be inspired by Puneet's story. And that's what we're here to do, right? Continue to encourage people along their lives as they maneuver it and find their purpose. See you in the next episode.